The night they came to Red Hollow, the sky sat low and heavy, like it was listening. Snow fell without urgency, each flake drifting as if it had nowhere else to be. The lamps along the boardwalk burned weak, their yellow light trembling in the cold, and the town breathed slow, wood creaking, shutters rattling, doors already closing themselves against whatever sorrow might be wandering in. I remember them the way you remember something that changes you without asking permission. Two figures stood at the edge of the street, hands clasped not out of romance, but necessity. The man leaned forward as though the wind itself might knock him down if he straightened too much. The woman's shoulders were narrow, her coat too thin for the season, but her chin stayed lifted. Pride does that. It keeps the head up even when the body is failing. They looked like they had been walking for days, though neither of them could truly walk anymore. They weren't begging. That was the strangest part. They waited, patient, as if kindness were something that might arrive on its own if given time. The first door they knocked on belonged to the boarding house. Warm light spilled through the windows. Laughter folded inside with the smell of stew. Martha Wilkes smoothed her husband's sleeve before knocking, a small, tender gesture, one of many she would make that night. Clara Mayfield answered with her usual tight smile, eyes flicking past them toward the empty street as though someone might be watching. "We can pay," Martha said quickly, her voice steady but thin. "Just one night." Clara's smile faded into calculation. She saw the worn boots, the trembling knees, the way Henry leaned more weight onto his wife than a man ever wants to admit. The door did not open wider. "I'm full," Clara said, though they both saw the empty chairs behind her. "Try the church." The door closed softly. That was somehow worse than if it had been slammed. They went to the church next. The handle was cold, unmoving. Locked. Snow gathered on Henry's shoulders while he rested his forehead against the wood, breathing hard, each breath sounding like it scraped something raw inside him. Martha whispered apologies to the door, to God, to the night itself. People watched from windows. Not openly, just enough to see without being seen. Red Hollow had always been good at that. The whispers began before the couple reached the sheriff's office. "They'll bring trouble. They'll never leave. Once you let them in, they're yours forever." Sheriff Amos Klein stood in the doorway when they reached him, hat low, hands tucked into his coat. He listened. He hesitated. He looked past them toward the town, as if hoping someone else might step forward and make the decision for him. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "I can't set a precedent." Henry nodded, as though he understood, though his legs shook so badly Martha feared they might give way entirely. She thanked the sheriff anyway. She always thanked people. It was habit, worn as deep as the lines around her mouth. By then the cold had settled into their bones. Not the kind you shake off by moving, but the kind that stays, patient and certain. That was when Elias Crowther came down from the timberline. He arrived the way storms do, without announcement. A mule plodded behind him, packs heavy with fur and time spent alone. Snow clung to his beard, his coat stiff with ice. He stopped at the edge of town, boots planted, eyes taking in everything at once. He had the look of a man who belonged more to the mountain than to people, someone shaped by silence rather than conversation. The town noticed him immediately. They always did. Children stared. Men adjusted their shoulders. Women went still. Elias Crowther did not visit Red Hollow often, and when he did, it was never for long. He saw the couple before they saw him. He noticed the way Henry's knees bent inward, the way Martha's grip tightened every time her husband swayed. He noticed the empty space around them, how rejection creates a kind of invisible distance no one wants to cross. He said nothing. He simply watched, the way a man watches something that feels uncomfortably familiar. Long ago, someone had closed the door on Elias Crowther too. Martha was the one who turned first. She saw him standing there, broad and unmoving, snow drifting around him like the world knew to make space. For a moment, she hesitated. Mountain men were not known for mercy. But desperation quiets fear, and love pushes harder than pride ever could. She guided Henry toward him, step by slow step. "We don't mean trouble," she said, before he could speak. We can't walk anymore." Her voice did not crack. That took effort. Years of it. Could we stay one night? She asked. Just until morning. The street fell silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. People leaned closer to their windows. They had already decided how this would end. Elias did not answer right away. He looked at Henry's boots, the soles worn nearly smooth. He looked at Martha's hands, red, swollen, still gentle where they rested on her husband's arm. He breathed in, slow, as if measuring something deeper than the cold. One night's a long time up the mountain, he said finally. No one knew whether that was a refusal. Then he stepped forward. He lifted Henry as if the man weighed nothing, settling him onto the mule with practiced ease. Henry's eyes widened, not in fear but disbelief. Martha stood frozen for a heartbeat before Elias took her pack without asking and slung it over his shoulder. Come on, he said, already turning away. That was it. No speech, no promise, just movement. The town exhaled, some in relief, others in judgment. Whispers followed them as they left the boardwalk behind. Fool. He'll regret it. They'll drain him dry. Elias did not look back. He walked ahead, steady, setting a pace Martha could follow. Snow thickened as they climbed, the town lights growing smaller, softer, until they looked less like safety and more like something that had already forgotten them. Martha glanced back once. The glow of red hollow shimmered in her eyes, then vanished behind the trees. She tightened her grip on her husband's coat and kept going. The cabin waited somewhere above, tucked into the mountain's shoulder, smoke long gone from its chimney. None of them said it out loud, but each of them felt it, the weight of that night, heavy with risk, fragile with hope. Behind them, the town slept easy, never knowing that the quietest acts of grace often happen just beyond the reach of its light. The fire caught slowly, like it needed to be convinced. Elias knelt close to the hearth, coaxing the flame with patience instead of force. And when it finally took, the light spread through the cabin in a soft, uneven glow. Pine walls leaned inward as if listening. The place smelled of smoke, dried herbs, and the long solitude of a man who had learned not to expect company. Martha lowered herself onto a stool, hands trembling now that the danger of the road was behind them. Henry sat where Elias guided him, breath shallow, eyes fixed on the fire as though it were something holy. No one spoke for a while. Warmth does that. It loosens words slowly, if at all. Elias set a pot on the stove. Water, then a handful of dried vegetables, a strip of salted meat he had been saving for no particular reason. He worked quietly, deliberately, as if feeding strangers were the most ordinary thing in the world. When the soup was ready, he served them first. Always first. You take the bed, he said, already moving a blanket to the chair for himself. Martha shook her head. We can't. You can, he said, not unkindly. And that ended the argument. That night, as the wind pressed against the cabin and the fire breathed low, stories found their way out. Not all at once, just pieces set gently between silences. Henry spoke of rail lines stretching farther than hope, of hands worn raw for wages that vanished too quickly. Martha spoke of a classroom once filled with children, chalk dust and laughter, a place that closed its doors and never reopened. They spoke of a child buried beneath cottonwood roots, of walking after that, because standing still hurt too much. Elias listened. He did not interrupt. He did not offer comfort in words, but he kept the fire alive. He added wood before it burned down. Sometimes that is how care is shown by men who have lived alone too long. Morning arrived pale and unsure. Snow still fell, gentler now, as if exhausted by the night. Elias stood at the table, counting what little coin he carried, weighing time against truth. He had planned to take them back to town. That had been the agreement, spoken or not. Henry tried to stand. His legs buckled before he was halfway upright. The sound he made was small, almost apologetic. Martha was at his side instantly, fear flashing across her face like a shadow she knew too well. Elias crossed the room in 2 strides and eased Henry back down. They all understood then. No one said it. These legs, Henry murmured, staring at his hands. They're done. Martha closed her eyes. The mountain had given them one night. It would not give them another road. By midday, Elias was walking back toward Red Hollow alone. The town saw him coming and braced itself. He had not stopped to talk. He went straight to the trading post, laying out furs, thick, prime pelts meant for a future he had quietly assumed would belong only to him. He sold them without haggling. Then the mule. Then the rifle he had carried longer than he could remember. Each item left his hands with a weight that surprised him, not with grief but clarity. By afternoon, word had spread. Elias Crowther stood in the center of Red Hollow with a folded deed in his coat pocket and nothing left to sell. He found Sheriff Klein near the office. "They're staying," Elias said. The sheriff frowned. "Where?" "There's a shack near the creek," Elias replied. "Roof leaks. Walls still stand. It's theirs now." The words hit the town harder than any shout could have. People stepped closer. Clara Mayfield pressed a hand to her mouth, eyes darting away, then back again. Someone muttered something about foolishness. Another said nothing at all, shame rising slow and hot. Elias turned and left before anyone could argue. When Martha and Henry came down from the mountain days later, they did not arrive as beggars. They came carefully, supported by a borrowed wagon, faces washed, clothes mended by hands that had once turned them away. The shack had been cleaned, a stove installed, blankets folded, then unfolded, then folded again, acts of quiet apology. Martha walked through town slower than before, but straighter. Henry leaned on a cane now, carved by Elias, and left without a word. Doors opened. Eyes met theirs and held. Clara brought bread. Sheriff Klein tipped his hat and said nothing, which meant everything. Elias did not stay. By the time winter loosened its grip, he was gone again, back to the high trails where the world asks less and gives more in return. But something had shifted. Red Hollow knew it. So did the mountain. Years later, when I think of that night, I don't remember the cold as much as I remember the way dignity returned to two people who had almost forgotten its shape. How one man's quiet choice forced a whole town to look at itself without flinching. If you're listening to this and wondering whether small kindness matters, let me tell you what I learned then. It isn't the grand gestures that change us. It's the door opened when no one is watching. The fire kept alive through the night. The way you treat someone when the world has decided they are already finished. Because sometimes all a person needs to stand again is one night of warmth, and someone brave enough to give it.